Apple just released the brand new M2 Pro and M2 Max MacBook Pros, and they look great, but there are many things that Apple did not tell you, both on the positive and on the negative, that's gonna change your buying decision. Now, I'm not gonna waste your time with all of the specs, but I do wanna let you know that we are doing a worldwide giveaway of a new MacBook Pro and a Mac Mini, and all I've gotta do is subscribe, enable notifications, and comment below, which you could do on each new Mac video we make for more chances to win. We're gonna choose the winners live on February 1st, so don't miss out on that video. Now, the first thing they didn't tell you is that these MacBooks were meant to come out months ago. We had many leaks that pointed to that, but they didn't come. And after this event, multiple people online mentioned that this video was scrapped from the October event, and Ian Zelba went in and downloaded metadata from the AR and from the wallpapers that clearly show what they were created in October, ready for a November release. Now, the second thing is that there are way more changes under the hood than just the performance that they are quoting. We have this whole chip layout, and one thing that was pointed out is that the TLB buffer was really increased. If you don't know, with the original M1 Pro and Max laptops, we found out in our testing that the GPU scaling was not good at all, especially with the M1 Max. Now, the way that these Apple Silicon chips are designed, you have a base chip, the M1 and M2, and then it gets duplicated to make the larger chips, and it should scale properly. But when we looked at the performance, it was not good at all. For example, if we're even scaling from the 14-core M1 Pro, we should have 80,000 for Geekbench 5, but in fact, we had 68,000, and that is because there was an issue with not enough memory buffer, and that was the bottleneck. But now we have reports where that was greatly increased and improved. So not only are you gonna have the quoted performance that they gave on their website, but in certain applications, the scaling will be much better. Now, we ordered 10 new M1 Pro and M1 Max machines, so we're gonna be doing a ton of testing with real-world programs, and we will see what the performance will be like. For example, in Blender, we should have way faster results with the 32 core compared to 24, but we didn't. So if you guys wanna see how they actually perform, make sure to click that subscribe button and enable notifications. Now, for the third one, we have to talk about the cores. Apple is showing off a 12-core system, 2 more than before, and that sounds great. But what they're not focusing on as much is that the 2 extra cores are actually efficiency cores, meaning the performance cores are staying exactly the same. Now, that might not help as much with performance, but that is gonna really help in terms of battery life, which I'm going to come back to. Next, we have to talk about the architectural design and the performance. Now, we had many leaks with this chip being 3nm and TSMC launching these. We've covered all of that. And with AMD going to 4nm, and it might be an in-between point, a lot of people thought these chips could be 4nm just like the A16, but no, they are still based off of 5nm, which is a bummer because that means that it will run hotter and use more power, just like we got with the M2 chip compared to the M1. What we have effectively is an overclocked processor running more power to get more performance, but that also affects the heat and thermals and throttling, which we're also going to talk about. But on the plus side, this also means that it's cheaper and easier for Apple to make these with better yields, and that also means better availability. But before I dive deep into the performance and other things they're not talking about, you need our sponsors must-have app for your new Mac, Clean My Mac X, which is notarized by Apple and has been on the market for 14 years. I bought it 3 years ago because it's simple but powerful and takes only seconds to install and use. Their assistant provides personalized tips, and Smart Scan will automatically clean up, protect, and speed up your Mac in seconds, which removed almost 10 GB of my junk files. You can also dive deeper, where I found a bunch of files I didn't need, along with malware protection and removal, an uninstaller that doesn't leave leftover files, and categorizes apps so I can easily see what I haven't been using, as well as an easy auto updater. Optimization and maintenance gives you control to easily fix your system, and Space Lens is super cool, visually showing my large files where I found a 55GB phone backup I deleted, plus a sensitive file shredder. This app has been great to use with its assistant recommendations and the menu that shows a ton of system info with tools like memory free up with one click. Clean My Mac is giving a 30% discount for 2 weeks after this video is released. Just make sure to use our download link in the description below. Now the next one is about the performance and clock speed. Now on Apple's website, they talk about the increase in performance being up to 20% more powerful in terms of the CPU and then 30 in terms of GPU. And they mention that it's in the same power envelope, but the thing is, with the M1 Pro and Max, a lot of times they didn't actually hit their max rated CPU wattage. Now, Apple didn't mention the clock speed. The M1 Max and Pro, they would run at up to 3.2 gigahertz, but based on the leaks that we have seen, this thing goes up to 3.68 gigahertz, likely 3.7, and that is a big jump from 3.2. Now, the way they show off their benchmarks is they show off the maximum performance, not what you actually get. And we also know from our testing that these Macs got really hot already, hitting over 100 degrees Celsius, and we did have thermal throttling a lot more so on the 14-inch model, but even the 16-inch model would throttle because of too much heat, because of too much wattage. So with this one, running higher clock speeds means it will pull more, it'll pull more for longer, and for longer renders, we might actually have more throttling. So that pretty good score in Geekbench, which is not limited by heat, might go down, and the 3.68 gigahertz might also drop down quite a bit for longer renders. Of course, we bought multiple configurations because we will be testing them out and telling you guys which one is worth buying. And next, let's switch to some positives. Now, with the previous MacBooks, the 16-inch actually was heavier with the M1 Max than with the M1 Pro because it had a better cooler. But the 14-inch model was the same, which also led to more throttling. But thankfully, this time around, if we go over to switch to the 14-inch and you go into the fine specs, you will see that the 14-inch M2 Max now weighs 3.65, so it's heavier than the M2 Pro instead of being the same. So hopefully they have stronger fans in this to help with cooling. Now the next one is battery life, and this is a positive. Now with this launch, Apple gave it a 1 hour better rating for both the 14-inch and the 16-inch model, but in my opinion, it's gonna be a lot better than that. And that is because I have tested the M2 chip already. Now I mentioned that we now have 12 cores, and instead of having 2 efficiency cores, we have 4, just like with the M2 and the M1 chips, but those cores are way more powerful, meaning that because of the extra power and doubling the cores, for a lot of tasks, you can just use those efficiency cores and not even touch the performance ones. Now with the M2 MacBook Pro and Air, I did testing with the low power mode that basically switches off the performance mode. And even though things do take longer, especially tough productivity, it is still more than fast enough and smokes Windows laptops in real world use while getting insane battery life. Now with that machine, Apple quoted the M2 MacBook Air slightly better in battery life, and in real world, we got about an hour better. But when we enable the low power mode, the CPU and GPU wattage drops like crazy, becomes extremely efficient, and instead of going from about 9 to 10 hours, I got 15 hours of real world use, which is insane. So with this machine, the new 14 and 16-inch laptops, if you're gonna use low power mode, it will actually be able to do so instead of basically making very little difference with the current 14 and 16-inch. Your battery life is gonna get a lot better, and that is a great thing. Now the next one is minor but interesting. With these MacBooks, we have the mini LED displays that look amazing. They hit up to 1600 nits. Beautiful, beautiful HDR, great for color grading HDR video and photos. But this time around, if we look at the fine print, I've not seen this before. It literally says in temperatures less than 25 degrees Celsius, which is around 77 Fahrenheit, meaning that now they're telling us once the Mac gets warmer, you're outside or in a warm room, you're not gonna get that full performance. Now, the next one is pricing. Now, here in the States, the prices stayed the same, even though I think it's costing Apple a little bit less to make these instead of doing like a 3 nanometer. Now, if we actually go and account for inflation though, that $3,500 for a spec like I have here actually turns into about $3,800, meaning that technically it's a little bit less expensive for us. But with that said, in other parts of the world, it unfortunately got a lot more expensive. For example, in Denmark, it went up by about 220 euros or 300 bucks. In England, it went up by 300 pounds, which is about 370 bucks, and even in Canada by $100. Now, one guy in Denmark said that he bought a 14-inch 1 terabyte discounted for 2,300 USD. Now these new ones are 3,300. That's a huge price gap, and Apple had some great sales recently, and he's asking, should I return it and get the new one? I would say for that big of a price difference, I would not do that. And surprisingly, in Singapore, they actually got cheaper by $100. So pricing is all over the place, and it does suck that it got more expensive in some regions. Next, we have connectivity. Now, this was mentioned on the slide, but I really have to emphasize this because these are the first Macs that have Bluetooth 5.3 along with Wi-Fi 6E. Other Windows laptops and Android phones have had this for a long time, and it's great that Apple added this, even though the M2 MacBook Air did not get it. Now, this is great if you have a new router and you're in a congested area because you have that special band, better for speed. And if you guys saw my video on Apple possibly making another Wi-Fi AirPower router, we have a lot of leaks about this, and that would be very cool to see. So I'm glad Apple is finally stepping it up. Now with that, the next one is the 96 gigabytes of RAM. That is a lot of RAM to have. I think it's more than enough or too much for most people, but if you want to get that what they advertise on screen, you have to have the 38-core M2 Max, the most expensive version of that. Now, I always do videos where I compare different amounts of RAM. So with all the MacBooks that I bought, I will be comparing 64 gig and 96, along with 16 versus 32, and even 8 versus 16. So if you guys want to see videos on how much of a difference that makes for different real world tasks, the next one, we need to talk about connectivity. Now, we were so excited to have HDMI again on a MacBook, but people are disappointed because it only supported 4K 60 with old school HDMI. But now, not only they show off that they have updated HDMI, what they didn't tell you is that this is something that nobody else really has. The M2 Pro supports up to 3 external displays, which is great, but the M2 Max now supports up to 4 external displays, which is a lot. You could use all 3 of the Thunderbolt ports along with that HDMI. And not only can you now do 4K 120, or you could do 6K 60, you can actually do 4K 240 frames per second, which is absolutely insane. Now the crazy thing is, if we go to hdmi.org, the main website, the latest HDMI 2.1a says they can only go up to 4K 120 frames per second, because that is the maximum bandwidth. So Apple is using something that is even better than the best announced version. Now that is because they are using display stream compression to make this happen. It adds very, very low latency, and it allows you to have higher resolutions, have HDR, 10-bit, and super high frame rates. Now I'm glad that Apple is putting in the latest tech into this. Now the one thing that you have to know is that if you want to make this work, you have to have a good cable, because there are so many fake HDMIs. HDMI 2.1 could actually be older. It's crazy. So you have to make sure you buy the right one. Now, I did some research and found a set of cables that are inexpensive, but they have the best ratings that will support anything that the laptop can output. So I'm gonna go ahead and link that down below. Now, along with that, we have memory, bandwidth, and RAM. The M2 chip got faster than M1, but Apple didn't mention that the M2 Pro and Max they did not get any faster. They're just advertising how fast it is. So they're sticking with the same exact RAM speeds as before. And along with that, the next one is the Neural Engine. The Neural Engine, they're showing off the 16-core one, and they're not saying that it's the same exact one as with the M2 chip. So if you're doing tasks that are based on the Neural Engine, more AI stuff, even in photography, a lot of stuff is using that now, it might not be any faster or much faster than just having an M2 MacBook Air. And the last one that I have for you guys is the fact that finally, the charging cable with MagSafe that's braided color matches the space gray on the laptops. Now, the one I got for myself is space gray, so that is nice, just like with the M2 MacBook Air. But that's just a simple one. Let me know which one surprised you the most. Once again, make sure you comment down below and check out each one of our new videos from the time of the launch on Tuesday up to February 1st and comment so that you can have a chance to win either a MacBook Pro or a Mac Mini. We've done these giveaways many times before. We ship them out, we pay for everything, so it's great. Click that circle above to subscribe to see more videos. Check out one of those right there. And if you want to buy one of these MacBooks, check out YouTube's shopping feature. This has been Max, and I'll see you in the next one.